Good evening. How are you doing? Welcome to the Hammer Museum. I'm James Bewley, Director of Public Programs and Education, and before I get started, you were really here at 7 a.m. this morning? That is amazing. Okay. Well, for you, yeah, let's hear it. What's your name? Julia? Julia, we wanted to get you something because you became a member so you could sit in the front row here at 7 o'clock. That's dedication. I don't know if you have that already, but there's a Mark Ryden book for you. Enjoy that from the Hammer bookstore. It comes with a free bag. Enjoy that. Bags are great. So before I get on to the evening here, I just want to let you know we're in the middle of free summer at the Hammer. And that means that all the exhibitions here, the Great Eden's Edge, the contemporary collections, the things that you see down in the lobby, all free, all the time through Labor Day. All of the public programs that we do here, and we do a great many, over 200 a year, all free. So come back. All this July, we have rock concerts every Thursday night in collaboration with Indie 103.1. Next week is Little Ones and the Pity Party. Week after that, Castle Door and Fields. And the final week is Midnight Movies and Seawolf. Free. And then Friday nights we're doing movies. It's a very active time, so we hope you come back often. A brief story now about the power of the internet and how this event came to be. Sometimes people wonder, and sometimes they don't, but I'm going to tell you anyway. This conversation series that we do, and we've done it for a couple of years now, is often like a celebrity blind date. And we don't know how it's going to go because usually they don't know each other very well and they just have a spontaneous conversation and then you can ask them questions at the end. We usually reach out to somebody and ask them who they most want to talk to and then we pursue it from there. In this case, a few years ago in about 2001 or so, I was involved in a little internet, very tiny internet flash animation thing called Strindberg and Helium, which is one guy. It's a very tiny part of the internet. Thank you, sir. It's kind of an odd couple situation where I wish I could bring you up to do the voice, but do just I'll say misery. Okay. That's a lot what it's like. About 4 minutes worth. We have 4 little animations on there, and it's August Strindberg, the playwright, and he's endlessly sad and kind of depressed, and that's the character that I play. And then what that guy just did, there's a floating pink ball of helium that's kind of endlessly annoying him and echoing him in that. Do it again, sir? There you go. But it'll be words like misery, and anyway, it's a great bit of fun. And so it's been out there in the world, and I'm telling you folks, if you don't know about the internet, get hip to it. This thing went to Sundance, it went to Entertainment Weekly, the It List. Yeah, that's pretty big time. You look like a lot of Entertainment Weekly readers. And on and on and on, and it's just been a really weird thing, and every few months or so we'll get an email and make more, or why are your t-shirts not black, or just, things like, why are they cost $16.99? Couldn't they be? Anyway, it's great to hear from the fans, is what I'm saying. And we heard from one fan a couple months ago, and that the email came in through the central mainframe there, and it said, Amanda Palmer, hey, Strindberg and Helium, we'd like to use a snippet, a sample, is what they call it in the music industry, a sample of one of your episodes in this album that I'm making with Ben Folds. And I said to my other cohorts there, hey, do you mind if I field this one? Because I have this other gig here at the Hammer. And so I emailed her and said, yes, absolutely, definitely, you can sample it, but I do this thing where I bring people together. I'll give you a little money, you can come and people show up, I promise. Thank you. And say who do you want to talk to? And that's how tonight came together. So that guy is responsible for us all being here. So give him a round of applause. It's good for a lot of other things too. Shopping is really easy. Anyway, so I'm very pleased that this all came about, and it's such a weird way, and it's funny how life works. Both of these two people are endlessly creative. They're both truth sayers. They tell it like it is. I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful night. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Amanda Palmer and Henry Rollins.
We don't know what the fuck we're doing, really. But we're gonna figure it out real fast.
Thank you very much for showing up for this. And the fact, I only learned this afternoon by going to the website and looking. I went to the Hammer Museum website, and I found out that this event was free, which I thought was really good. Because all too often, to get any kind of culture, not that I'm going to be able to provide any, but you have to pay a price. And in other countries where art is valued, and cinema and expression and communication, and these kind of get-togethers where we basically communicate so we keep from going insane and becoming very dangerous to ourselves and others, you have to pay a price, so it almost becomes an elitist pursuit. But this is a fairly rarefied neighborhood, but the fact that we can all get together for free in such nice weather and such relatively safe environs is a very nice thing. And if we had more of this more often, I think this country would vote differently. I think, well, at least we'd be having more fun. So anyway, thank you for showing up.
Thank you all for being here.
And hopefully we'll keep it lively. We don't have much of an agenda. She got offered to do this thing first. And
so he wants me to start. But it's good because I thought of a question while I was downstairs. Shall we? Well, one of the things that I mentioned was that when I was initially offered to do this, and when I got the offer, I submitted a list of people that I wanted to talk to, and I mentioned downstairs that only a little higher on the list, out of great respect to Henry, was Noam Chomsky, who couldn't make it. But you said something interesting downstairs, which was that Noam is getting kind of old, and when you get to a certain point in your life, or maybe not, maybe you start prioritizing how you're going to spend this day, this month, this year, and you sort of assess what it is that you want to do, get done, relate to whomever. And that was sort of when I was thinking about topics that we might just sort of rap about. That was one of the ones that I thought was going to be important to me, because if I were just sitting in a coffee shop with this guy, what I would want to ask is basically the same question. There's a lot of things that you can do. I mean, as a human being, as an artist, as a man, whatever. And, you know, you make decisions about how you want to prioritize your time, but, you know, not that necessarily you have some sort of overarching agenda or plan, but do you find yourself ever stepping back and reflecting about, this is how I'm going to spend my time on earth. I could do one of these 50 things. I could do one of infinite numbers of things, and you're choosing to tour, or you're choosing to write a book, or you're choosing to act in a film. And there's not an answer to this question, but maybe you could just talk about thoughts that you've had as you look at your life and you assess how you're going to spend the time.
Well, I spend a great deal of my time in different states of desperation. And desperation keeps me in the present. I'm desperate to do something very well. And then when I'm done doing it, I'm desperate to get on to the next thing. What I don't do is relax much or pause much. And the women at the office, my office, they tell me that I don't enjoy enough. because I'm always trying to get through one thing to get to the next thing, only to get through it. And so I kind of, with a great deal of anger and futility, sometimes I just throw myself into the next thing. Not always with a great deal of direction, in that I'll do this for a while and then this will take me here. I'm going to go on tour for a while, and I'm going to come back and I'll see what comes up. If I'm going to work on a book, that's going to take a few months, so I'll be book dude, and I'll just sit in front of the computer and read my writing over and over again until I hate it enough to where I finally send it off to the printer because I can't stand looking at it. You know how that is. But I've never really said, well, I'm going to be the great. I just kind of, in my line of work, in our line of work, there is an amount of instability where sometimes I always figure, this is it. This is the last year I get to do this. Next year I'm going to ask for employment at the local venues, and they're going to go, no, we don't care about you anymore. No one cares. And I'm 46 years of age, and I have been basically doing an approval-based bit of employment for 26 plus years. Basically, if they don't clap, I don't eat.
Do you consider yourself an insecure person?
I'm desperate to survive America. And that sounds a little bit paranoid and apocalyptic, but it's true. It's why I live below my means, and I'm always scrambling for the next job. I like to work. I like to do things. I like to be involved, and part of the awful part about that is a lot of the things I do to distract myself from myself. I like to be...
Why?
Because it's an awful world inside.
Why?
Bad luck, and just bad luck. Some of the things I've seen, some of the things I've been through, tend to occupy bigger parts of my thinking if I let them. So I try and compartmentalize them by going, wow, I'll do 50 shows. You know what? I'll do 75.
Do you think you're, like, while you're doing this, are you aware of the fact that you might just be distracting yourself from something else?
Absolutely. And the girls at my office, I
want to meet the girls.
Oh, no,
the
yeah,
office.
they're great. They're great. They've been there for 10 years, and they hector and badger me at all times, basically calling me out on my corny bullshit. And when I say I have good work ethic, I go out and do this, so they go, you're a coward, basically, because you don't have the guts to sit still, you don't have the guts to meet the nice gal and settle down, and you couldn't handle it.
You don't necessarily have to do that.
Well, thank you. Where have you been for the last 10 years sticking up for me? And so basically, they just said I'm too weak to be able to accept happiness or any kind of enjoyment or contentment. And so instead of doing that, I'm a coward. And I keep booking more tours, basically trying to defer my midlife crisis and basic adulthood.
There might be something in that.
Well, there's probably a lot in it, but I come from the minimum wage working world, and my future, and I'm not putting that down, but it was fairly limiting. And in the late 70s, early 80s, I became part of the, I was out there scooping ice cream, hauling out trash, whatever you can do for $3.50 an hour. And I saw the dead end of it very quickly. I went, wow, I could be doing this for the rest of my life, only it'll be harder to eat, and this job will be kind of silly when everyone around me is 19 and I'm 35. This will look bad. And so I had the opportunity to leave my hometown of Washington, D.C., come out here, be in a band, and go on and on from there. And so basically I feel like Jethro Bodine whenever I go into an audition. Like, woohoo, I get to keep this pen. I just think it's all an upgrade to me. And so said, can you do voiceovers? I'm like, are you paying? Yeah, I can do a voiceover. Can you act? I'm like, yeah. Have you ever had any acting training? If I say the wrong thing, do I not get the job? And so I just wanted, I without a great deal of fear, I just go for it, knowing what I'm really skilled to do has me back asking you if you want fries with that.
Well, do you feel like your talent is legitimate? I mean, do you feel like...
Not at all.
So you feel like you're one of those artists, not unlike me sometimes, who feel like you're just totally, like, everyone is buying it, and thank God they haven't found out yet?
Sometimes, because, well, when I'm on stage, I mean everything I say, and when I write something, I mean it. I just don't know if it's anything more than mediocre. There are some things I do in a very mercenary way, like I want to be gainfully employed. Because I like to work. I think one should work and work vigorously until you keel over. I don't like vacations. I want to work. And so when they say, hey, you want to be in this movie, I'm not an actor. And so, but I give it my all when I'm on the set. I will kill myself for that scene. I want to do it. And I work very, very hard as possible. But I always keep expecting the movie police to come in right in the middle of a scene and go, okay, cut, you, come here. Like,
that's how I feel basically every night when I'm on stage. The music police are going to come and get me.
But you know,
not the movie police.
I think that might not be the worst thing because it keeps you really striving for it. I mean, but inside you know that you really want to do that music. It is inside you, right?
That's possible. I haven't figured that
Well,
out yet.
could you?
I've talked to a lot of people about this, though. It's not just, I mean, I think musicians and artists have a bad case of it, but almost everyone I've talked to, whether they're a lawyer or a student or whatever they're doing, they actually feel like they don't belong there. And if they're a doctor, the doctor police are going to come. And if they're a lawyer, the lawyer police are going to. Everyone is convinced they're pulling one over on everybody else. And you talk to the most legitimate people and you get them in the right situation, they're like, I don't actually really belong here. They're going to find me out.
Well, you know, maybe one should be afraid of the ones who say, yeah, I'm really good at this.
I'm just jealous of those people.
Really? I love the fact that I am always surprised when someone shows up for the show. Are there anybody out there? Oh, yeah. I'm like, really?
Oh my God.
Yeah, they're here? And I feel like an 8-year-old. Oh, they're here. It's like Christmas morning for me, and I've done more shows than like anyone I've ever met, and I've never gotten over that.
I think maybe everyone feels this way, but we're being honest about it.
I don't know. Could be. I've met in the entertainment world. I've met the big and the very small, the ones on their way up and the ones on their way down. And the ones who are like very established, who are really, really good at what they do, they're often the most humble and the most like, yeah, I hope I pull this off. Are you kidding? You're Al Pacino. You can do this. I don't know. And then there's the guy on the hip indie label who's on his way up, and when you meet him, it's an honor for you to meet him. You're like, hey, I like your band. He's like, oh yeah, okay, thanks. I'm like, oh, I see. That was an honor for me. My hand is now privileged. I'll see you on the way down. And I'll be going down with you. I'll be in that descending elevator. And to any of you who aspire, hopefully in your 50th year doing this, you will also just keep aspiring. It's like that concept of enlightenment. If anyone ever tells you, oh, I'm enlightened, you're like, oh.
Don't buy it.
If you're on your way, well, then you're still journeying. Here's something you might like. If you've ever heard of the great saxophone player Sonny Rollins, who's pretty damn good at playing a horn at this point, I interviewed him for long distance. He was in Japan, I was in New York, and some magazine said, would you like to interview Sonny Rollins? I said, I'll carry the water, I'll do anything to meet Sonny Rollins on the phone, in person, whatever, because I'm a great fan of his. And so they said, we're going to set up a phone interview. I said, okay. And so I said, you know, Mr. Rollins, yeah, call me Sonny. Well, okay. I said, I was raised on your music. My mother used to play your album, The Bridge, when I was very young. He's like, you tell your mother I said hello. I said, that's a call I'm going to make later. And so we get to talking about music and what it means and his friendship with John Coltrane and just what this amazing life he's had in music. And so at the end he said, Henry, this amazing thing happened today. I got up, I was meditating very early in the morning, and I started playing my horn, and it occurred to me that I was working on a new tune, and I said, wow, I'm onto something. I'm starting to get good at this. I think I'm getting the hang of the saxophone. I said, let's see, Mr. Rollins, you've been gainfully employed as a bop genius giant in the world of jazz for decades. I mean, you are an indisputable heavyweight king of jazz. It's not up for debate. And you're just getting the hang of it. He goes, yeah, I think I think I'm onto something. And that was huge for me, because if I could be still full of wonder and fear and trepidation at the craft at that age, well, that means you're still amazed by it and you're still open to be moved. Like Duke Ellington, who is, I don't know, 150 years old, he was one of the old guys who was still listening to new jazz when a lot of his contemporaries were going like, nah, this stuff's too noisy, it's awful. When he was still open-minded, and if you listen to one of his last records, the Afro-Eurasian Eclipse, I think it's called, it's one of the last things he ever did. He's like, you know, he was dead 40 minutes later. And if you listen to it, you hear a guy about to step into a whole new world of music. And so he was still trying to get to the next thing. He was still open. And that's what I try and do. And so that's why I work really hard. Basically, I flagellate myself with this stuff in an effort to, as they say, keep it real. Because when you're young and desperate, the girl leaves you. Well, there's the new album. It writes itself. You know, you get suicidal. I'll never find another girl again. Trust me, the world's full of them. You'll be fine. Then you become my age and the girl leaves, and you're like, must be Wednesday, and you put on a you put on a Tom Waits record, and you figure he's onto something. But it's very easy at a young age because your life is so at the top, you know, it's so close to your skin. When you get older or more experienced or more times around the track of mining this stuff from you, it becomes harder to find. But the job is to find that thing. That way you had like shovels full when you're 20-something. When you're 40-something, you know it's there, but you have to bypass all those ways you can fool yourself and do a caricature of yourself. So it gets harder and more painful as one gets older. It has for me, to keep it real.
Well, I feel like I've had this conversation probably 5 or 6 times in the past year where I sat around with a bunch of friends and we tried to figure out, okay, who has become old, like, over the, I think we probably had this conversation. We've tried to figure out, okay, who actually pulled it off into their 50s and 60s? Like, who's up there that people my age still respect and still go out and we buy the record? And like, and if we trace back, is there any common trajectory? And okay, so like, and we're trying to figure out, okay, who's up there? And you know, people will argue about this. There's Tom Waits, there's David Bowie, you know, there's a couple of people who are out there and they're still making records that are interesting, that don't sound like the last record. And one of the things that we noticed is that when we took all of those artists and we put them in a pile and we tried to figure out what these artists had in common, most of them weren't writing about girls leaving them in their 20s. I mean, they were sort of, but their music wasn't youth-oriented when they were young. And that's why they didn't have to go like, holy shit, now I'm 35, what do I write about? Like, I'm married. There's nothing left. And, I mean, I'm sure you can pull it off, but if you start out not focusing on that one very, like, youth-oriented or girl-oriented path, then everything is already open. You don't have to backtrack and go somewhere else.
Absolutely. Yeah, I came up in the world of rock music and independent rock, or, you know, punk rock or whatever, and MTV and all of that, where sometimes age is an issue, where you're on stage and like, look at that old guy up there, what does he think he's doing? And then I never felt old on stage. I just felt like I'm me doing my thing. But some other people go, aren't you? You know, you're a little long in the tooth there. And then I just look at Iggy Pop, who I saw play about, I don't know, 7 or 8 weeks ago here in town. It was the first or second show after his 60th birthday, and he was terrifying. He was a monster. You know, he looks like Bruce Lee with a dye job. He's just like
scary.
But it's not the body that is young about him. It's the head. It's the why he plays music. And I find that there's a lot of people, like when you look at the Rolling Stones, who I have a great deal of respect for. Admittedly, they do have to go out and play those same 20 songs every tour. Everyone says rip off and they don't buy the t-shirt. And they have become kind of a ritualized bit of entertainment. But when I see them on stage, it occurs to me that they really love being up there and they really love giving that thing to the audience every night. And I think maybe just the music itself keeps them in a young or perpetual in the moment state of mind. Another thing I've noticed And it is kind of relates to what you said. I think that makes a really great deal of sense about, you know, people who didn't write about the girl left me thing, because I don't think Bowie ever did that. He just wrote about, you know, space aliens, and yeah, I'm a great fan of his, and he's a fascinating guy. I spoke to him many years ago for like, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes. But I've noticed if you ever check out a lot of Afrobeat music or what would be considered world music, if any of you were lucky enough or smart enough to go see Kanono #1 from Kinshasa at the Henry Fonda Theater a couple of months ago, it was me and like, I don't know, 150 people. It was right after Coachella, so I think a lot of people were still stranded in the desert. But I had just finished watching a great player named Manu Chao play on my show. So I was with Manu Chao all afternoon, and I was driving back from the studio, and I went by the Henry Fonda, and it said, tonight, Kanono 1, and I have all their albums. I'm a great fan. I was like, oh, that's right. A night of electrified Lakimbe music. Well, I'm going. And I just pulled right in, walked. I go, you selling tickets to this show? And they went, yeah. $25 later, I walk in. I took a nap on the floor. There's no one there. And then Kanono came out, and they have a couple of young guys in the band holding down the rhythm. But the Lakimbe players are like, I don't know, 60, 70 years old. They didn't look old to me. They just looked like in the moment. Or if you see King Sunny Ade or Olatunji, you see these people play and you realize the music is this eternal thing.
Well, and that doesn't take away their credibility.
No, not at all.
And that's the thing about Iggy Pop or about any artist. I mean, and I was just talking about this in my blog because we just came off tour with Debbie Harry and Cyndi Lauper and Erasure, who are all, you know, well into their 50s and 60s in Debbie Harry's case. And the thing about Iggy Pop is that, you know, you watch that and you're just amazed, but still when you read the reviews, there's a lot of, despite his age, like, and everything is like, you know, and the fact that he's so old and yet still rocks. And it's in that context. And I started thinking about that, and I was like, well, that's what a lot of these reviews that came out on this last tour were like that, you know, and Cyndi was rocking despite her age, and, you know, Debbie Harry was showing her age, or Cyndi was showing her age, and Debbie Harry was rocking despite her age, and it was one way or the other, and it's the same way with artists who are very young. You know, if someone is really talented and 17, they're rocking despite their age, or they're showing their youth and their immaturity, and there's this sweet spot that you get, I guess, as a rock musician after a certain age and before a certain age, where you won't read that despite your age you sound great.
Yeah, it's that moment where you're the same age as your audience.
This particular job, I mean, if you're a painter, you probably don't get a lot of that, and you don't get a lot of, like, despite his age, you know, he's 55 and yet this painting is fantastic. In fact, it's the opposite. You only gain credibility. You don't have to grasp onto it and convince everyone that, you know, at Iggy Pop's age, you can still get on stage and be a badass and do do what you want to do and how you want to do it. And that age, you know, maybe it's a factor because you're battling this or that, but that's not what you want people to pay attention to. You don't want to just get out there and feel like your point of being out there is proving yourself.
True. Yeah, I think we live in a society that values youth. It is a target demographic for a lot of people who sell things to other people. And it is the most liquid, cash-carrying demographic in this country, our young people, generation whatever letter they're on now. And I think if you look at ads, there's not old codgers in Gap ads. It's always, you know, young, breastless girls and effeminate, you know, big cheekboned men. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, wow, they're so young, they're so skinny, they're so ready to wear these pants, and they look so... And they don't put a guy like me in those ads. They're like, yep, I wear them. You know, they're not... Because guys like me, they try and sell Cialis too. Judging from the spam I get. Just saying.
When I run the Gap, you're going to be my model.
Thank you.
I promise.
But I think we kind of live in an ageist culture.
But I mean, there's something very particular about music. I mean, we live in an ageist culture, but it applies to certain things and doesn't apply to others in the arts, like I was just saying. I mean, you're not going to get an ageist reaction if you're a sculptor or a painter or a filmmaker necessarily. I mean, there's going to be that stuff in play.
Yeah, but those people aren't on MTV. You know, they're not marketed in that way.
So it's something very particular to rock.
Yeah. Well, I've been around for quite a while in the music thing, and I remember music before MTV. And I came up in the 70s loving my small Sony clock radio, which I would listen to in my bedroom alone, and listen to FM music. Back when FM was, you'd hear Stevie Wonder right next to Aerosmith, right next to Kool and the Gang. It was very eclectic for FM music. Now it's very targeted, and you know, this station plays only this and this. Back in those days, whatever the DJ really felt like playing, he didn't have the clear channel gun to his head going, play this or you're fired. And so I listened to all kinds of music, never knowing what these people looked like, never knowing what the DJ looked like. The lady with the cool voice would come out at night. Are you still up? I'm like, yeah, I am now. Because there's something in her sultry tones that were just very alluring. And I listened to...
And you didn't want to know what she looked like?
Well, no, I didn't, but I didn't care. It was an oral experience. And then came MTV, where now musicians have to be able to act. They have to be able to do a thing with their guitar. When back in my day, when I used to go see arena rock before punk rock, you couldn't even get close enough to the stage to see what Tyler looked like. Or like when I saw Led Zeppelin, I was, I don't know, like a mile and a half away. And me and Ian MacKaye were standing next to each other. We were literally sharing a pair of binoculars to see Led Zeppelin. Like, look, they're really on stage. And they could have been stand-ins, we never would have known. And so then with punk rock, of course, I got to be actually sweated on by the bands because you could be right there and be part of it. But with MTV, all of a sudden, music became this thing that we looked at and evaluated, not necessarily something we just listened to. And I think that has had a great effect on how bands get signed, how they look, how they're marketed, and it's had an effect on how the music sounds. Because now that we've taken out of the equation, well, she can't sing. Well, we can fix that. She sure looks good. And so what's easier to find? The good-looking boy and girl or the talented, boy and girl? Well, good-looking people are easy to find. So if we can change the priority from talented to good-looking, then we'll just have basically major label menudo, where we'll just if these bands don't hit, we'll find more pretty people with Pro Tools and pitch correction. They too will sound like the other one. And so from that, there'll be no more Ella Fitzgeralds unless they're raised in a cave and kept away from that. There'll be no more, of these great voices unless they are kept away from all of that poison. Well,
an interesting thing is that while this is true, my generation was the first sort of, I think I was 6 in 1982, and I remember literally racing home every day after school to watch MTV and eat cereal in front of MTV. And to me, that's what listening to the radio is. I didn't really listen to the radio much. I got most of my music through MTV and a couple other sources. But I come back to this in a different way often when I'm being interviewed, because my band gets a lot of shit for being visual. And I grew up with music having to be visual. To me, there wasn't much separation between music and some kind of image in my head. So when I was, walking around or at school with my Walkman on or sitting in my room listening to music, there was always something in my head that went along with it. And I was usually making it up. But to me, music and visuals went hand in hand, and I'm sure MTV had a lot to do with it, because from the get-go, I was seeing these two things being presented as a whole. But it was also back when MTV was really fucking interesting, and people were making videos that were imaginative, and you were watching stories and characters and just weird stuff that you didn't even understand, but it was in some kind of context where it was just being presented to you. If it didn't make any sense, it didn't matter. That was part of the song now. And when you heard Sledgehammer, you were seeing that stuff in your brain. And when you heard Owner of a Lonely Heart, you were seeing those maggots in the guy's eyes. That was just part of the song. And there was a turn away from that, I think, in the 90s, or whenever it sort of became un-okay to be totally visual with your band, and sort of when the grunge era ushered in all of this sort of, you must be totally authentic again on stage, and like hair and makeup and costumes are really not allowed now. And things have just sort of it's been really interesting, because I feel like even in just the course of my own band, I've watched things full circle back. And now music is sort of allowed to be image, you know, not image motivated, but there was some sort of separation for a while where I think people forgot that music was also about performance and imagination and fantasy, and people were sort of, you know, sort of anti that idea that you could actually just get up and be creative and have fun and come up with something that no one else had come up with before, instead of just getting on stage and like having to strum your guitar as hard as possible and pour your heart out about something that was actually true and real to me right now. And that's, you know, I think that we owe a lot to MTV at the same time, in that it opened up a new channel in everybody's head about what, you know, what you could do with the songs, and it's spreading into a different area right now, because MTV is so dead, but people are doing it through the internet now. And it's gotten even more democratic, because now, you know, that if I had had a video camera and a computer when I was 12 years old, I would have been taking those things out of my head. And instead of gathering my 7th grader friends and putting on, you know, little mini plays to songs by The Cure on my back porch, I'd be videotaping them and throwing them up on YouTube and sharing them with all the other Cure fans and getting everyone excited like I see our fans doing. So it's an interesting lineage there, and I don't think it's necessarily all negative.
No, but I think that it had a very interesting effect on bands in the 80s and 90s. Like I said before, where a band had to look a certain way. Back in the 80s, when I was just started doing music, the punk rock scene could be incredibly restrictive. These people with their anarchy A's on armbands would tell you, well, your hair's too long. I go, you're an anarchist. All the nonconformists, all the nonconformists gather over here, or you'll be late for the anarchy meeting. I mean, I just figured, if you guys are into breaking the rules, why are you telling me I shouldn't be wearing these shoes? If you're the no rules gang, you're the biggest rules gang I ever met. And so anything that just said it has to be this way, sometimes I would go against it, but most of the time I would just tune out. And the older I get, I don't read any press I do. I never read any reviews about me. I could care less really what anyone thinks. I'd rather be...
Did you at some point before and just find that it wasn't working?
Every once in a while you'd read something and you'd get mad at the journalist. And then you'd say, I would say, well, aren't I a little too precious? Am I Joe Stalin, or is this guy allowed to have an opinion? Sometimes the British journalists can make you want to get violent. Years ago, there's a magazine called Uncut, and they put in one of my album covers in there, and they asked me to talk about the album cover, so I sent in this blurb. And they said, okay, he wrote that, and it said underneath my caption, well, he wrote that because he's really stupid. I was like, oh, okay. Maybe we should have a talk about that. And so I'm going to be in England in a few days, and on my press itinerary, there's a phone interview with Uncut magazine. And I said, well, I can't do a phone interview with them. I can only do it in person. And we'll see how that comes out. Because we'll see what. And I don't like being put in that position, because you can get sued. It's illegal to tear someone's ear off and throw it in the guy's dog's food bowl. You can't do that. But that's exactly what occurs to me to do. Like, here's your ear. Am I still stupid to you?
Have you ever managed to convince a journalist otherwise? Have you ever managed to actually, in a nice way, because this actually happened to us once. We once got a review in some Australian magazine that was so horrible that it was outstanding, and it was so well written that we really had to pay attention to it, and it went on a long poetic rant how I had absolutely no singing ability, Brian had no drumming ability, which was actually hard to believe, and that we sounded like a bad acid trip in Walt Disney World or something like that. And whatever it was really creatively done, and the guy had obviously really put time and effort into making the worst review possible, and it just went on and on. So we went out of our way to get in touch with the label, who got in touch with the publicist, to get in touch with this guy, because we just wanted to invite him to a show, because he hadn't seen us. At that point, our record had come out, but no one had seen us. And I sent him an email saying, like, we will pay for a car to go to your house, pick you up, and bring you to our show, where we will get you the best seats in the house, and we'll bring you whatever drink you want. Just because I want you to actually see the band. If for no other reason than to see that the drummer's talented. Which he is. And the guy came. I don't know if we actually had to, like, you know, ply him with drinks. But he loved the show. He, like, wrote a fantastic review of the show. And I felt like we had won, and we didn't have to beat anybody up.
Yeah, I'd rather just be able to club the guy like a baby seal.
You're a boy!
But that's just me. I'm someone who actually derives great satisfaction from that kind of thing.
You say you don't hit girls. What if the journalist was a woman?
Oh, then I just have to take it. Yeah. You know, I'm not wired that way, but I'll smack a man. And I'm not a tough guy. I just get mad. But that was a while ago. Now, if I get to address the man from Uncut Magazine, it will just be funny. I mean, what am I going to do? You know, it'd be like, pal. You know,
tell him he's stupid.
Well, you know, how stupid am I? Like, let's just do the interview about how stupid I am. You know, you work at a hack magazine, and I probably own a magazine. I don't know. It very well could be. They're back there with my concubines. I don't know, on the ranch or my compound or whatever I'm doing. But to me, those things, you know, even doing videos and all of that, to me at this point is just distraction. You know, where
Have you ever made a video?
Oh yeah, many. Yeah, sure, a lot. And some really cool ones, you know, where I storyboarded the thing and we brought in the guy and.
Are you usually in them?
Oh yeah, sure. Just because they're basically performance-based. I mean, you know, where like I'll be singing some of the guitar guy, you know, comes in on the motorcycle, you know, like. But one of the ones we shot that I really liked, we shot it in Calcutta, India, and I was going to go to India, and there was a song I wrote about travel and discovery, and it's called Illumination. And so I said, I'm going to be in India. Why don't we shoot some of the footage out there? And they said, well, capital idea. And, you know, we had the budget, major label budget. And so we flew a film crew from the UK to meet me in Calcutta. And we shot for a few days in Bolpur in Calcutta. And it was, you know, India's amazing anyway. But we got some amazing footage from that. And shot the rest of it in downtown LA and kind of merged it all together, and it's actually very artistic and very cool. And the song was good, I thought, and MTV looked at it and went right into the trash can. I went, oh, okay, fuck these people.
They're not
and
very
so that's when I gave up on MTV and never spent anything more than about $30 on a video after that. Because it just wasn't really worth it to me. Where making music is, and getting it out to people, even if there's 10 people in the audience, and that hasn't happened yet, but it's been close. And if I keep up, no doubt, I will be back where I started with like 2 people and back. You suck! That, you know, and for some of us, that's kind of that circle. That's the circle we make. That's definitely where I'm headed. It's just what happens, but you never know. But long ago, I stopped really caring about anything but the work, you know, the integrity of the work and making sure it hurts to do it. It's still real. It still has meaning to me. What anyone thinks about it, like Pharoah Sanders said to a reviewer who gave him a bad review, he said, I played what I played and you heard what you heard. And I just kind of at this point, I just kind of leave it at that, you know, because I'm really not interested in someone else's opinion. I do like those kind letters I get when someone goes, you know, something you wrote really helped me, or something you wrote really made me mad, but it made me think. I disagree with most of the things you say, but I like that you're saying it, and I always like coming to your show so I can have something to disagree with and, you know, get my wheels, you know, I'm like, hey, I'll take it. It's apathy, which is, you know, it makes me angry. Like when you go out there on stage and make a loud noise and people are checking their watches or they're texting someone.
Texting and cell phone cameras are like the worst thing to have happened to live music in the past few years.
I saw something really interesting. I was watching, God, I'm kind of nervous on stage, so I'm forgetting her name. Oh, come on. Who's the great performer who was on the show? The girl. She's so fantastic. Did her first ever, Peaches.
She's awesome.
She's a god. And her records are great, but live, it's as cool as seeing Queen. And the bigger the venue, I think the better she and her band would be. She just uses the stage. I mean, she's just amazing. And I saw her at a venue down the road from here called the Avalon, used to be called the Palace. And she was just stunning. I mean, some of you were at the show. She was great, right? But her audience are, you know, young people with all the new gadgets. And she would come to the front of the stage, and I swear to God, every single person would raise a cell phone. Does that happen at your shows?
It's so weird.
Yeah. See,
'Cause you
people who
feel
come
like
to my shows.
and no one's looking at you because they're looking at you on the screen. And you feel, and these are supposed to be the most devoted fans, and you feel totally ignored.
Yeah. People come up, they raise tin horns from their ear. Huh? Or they raise paper cups with wax strings. Speak up. They're trying to hear you back in Hershey. So it never happens to me.
This is actually, I mean, this is a really good question. Whether it happens or not, the phenomenon is that it's not so much that they're getting the picture. It's that they're getting the picture that is immediately shareable. Because I think if they were just getting the picture and it was going to forever remain on their cell phone, you wouldn't see them all flying up into the air. It's the fact that you know that, you know, especially teenagers who are just living online and living on MySpace are going home and they're immediately uploading it to their photo page and they're immediately sending it to all of their friends and saying, I was there, it was real. Even though they weren't there for that moment. They were out of it and they were lost. And that's getting scarier and scarier because I feel prey to it myself. I mean, it happens even outside of technology. It's the sort of thing that happens if you're an artist and you relate and you write to relate, or you do stand-up and you're living and you realize that a bit just happened to you and that something interesting and relatable just happened to you and you're processing it in a different way than you would have if you weren't ever going to relate that event or that story or that great moment that you just had. And you start to feel like you like there might be this dangerous synthesis going on in your mind where, you know, how do you decide how much of your life to just live and not share and not try and find some heavy meaning in it and not try and relate back out to the world through music or through art or through your blog or through your fucking MySpace pictures or whatever your medium happens to be. The thing is right now, everybody has a medium. It didn't used to be that way. It used to be whatever happened to you happened to you, and whoever was at the dinner table or at school the next day might hear about it. But you had a limited audience, and now everybody has an infinite audience.
Well, a lot of people have been turned into content suppliers to other content suppliers. A friend of mine, Mark Maron, a very agile comedian and social commentator, said that's what people do these days. They put 50 photos of themselves online, like, here you go, world. Run, don't you want it? Like, no one cares about your fat face looking up. Like, look, we were here, I'm standing next to the other guy, we're both waving at the, like, no one cares. But everyone has like 50 of those shots. And the other day I was in Washington, D.C., and I hear this woman talking to her friends in a very loud voice, so her conversation, her monologue was inescapable. And it was so boring. And I'm really not one to be able to judge anyone, not from the low purchase I am clinging to, but she was real boring. And she went on for like, and then I told the guy like, $4, that's a lot of money to pay for. And then she said, and I wrote about it on my blog. I'm like, oh man. I just imagine this woman coming out of the Olive Garden like, are you kidding? Like, and they ran out of pasta. I mean, they said it was all you can eat, and I only got 8 pounds in me, and like, what a ripoff. And so, and she said, and all these people wrote me back and said, yeah.
We all agree.
And the fact that she can cast that out there, and there's a bunch of people reading going like, hell yeah. I feel ya, emoticon.
But there's actually something to that. I got into massive blog. First of all, I think the word blog itself is really embarrassing.
I never say it. I hate it. It's the English language. Nope. It's terrible. It's the English language yet again. Just it's what the president does to my English. He just destroys it. And to say the B word, it's just these syntheses of words, or like an application. Oh, it's a really good app. No, it's an application. Say application, or what's your Addy? I don't have one of those.
You must really love guesstimate.
Which one?
Guesstimate. That's one of my least favorite.
Oh, guesstimate?
Fucked up English, not English words. People actually.
I never use it. Well, yeah.
Don't start.
Never.
The point was, I got into a blog argument with my good friend, and I just saw your face like crumble when I said the B word.
I'm uptight.
I was having an argument about online journals with my good friend Michael Pope, who's a great filmmaker, and he abhors just the concept of it, the idea that somebody, especially if they have a mundane existence, would sit down to actually further relate their mundane existence to somebody else. But after a long conversation and probably many glasses of wine, we actually came to this beautiful middle spot where we determined that you can have a really exciting, adventurous life filled with travel and fame or art or spirituality or what have you, something that people might specifically be interested in. But if you're not a good writer and you're not relating it in an interesting way, don't fucking write about it. It's pointless. But on the other hand, you can be a suburban housewife from outside St. Louis and going to Olive Garden. But if you have an interesting spin on what happened to you at Olive Garden and an interesting way of writing about it that actually really touches people and that people can relate to, and what you write fires them up so much and they feel so connected to you that they're all sitting there going, fuck yeah. That's its own talent.
Sure. Well,
and
yeah.
you can live in a white room with white walls on a chair and have a lot to say for yourself on a,
or you could just lie.
Forum.
I mean, I think I wish there would be more blogs where people just make things up. I got out of my car, which was on fire, and entered into my job, which is, looking over classified documents and, stuff like that. And if the Olive Garden lady would come up with stuff like that, and it could be all completely bull,
I think that's legitimate.
Yeah.
I think you should do it.
So if you have a boring life, you should make it really interesting. Even if you have to lie a little, maybe. Well, I don't like using lies, but like for the Olive Garden lady need to pep up her act a little. I try and live a kind of an Indiana Jones lifestyle in my own kind of demented way, in that I use travel. I go to places just because I get very curious and I like to come back with a story. And because you raised a very interesting point a few moments ago where you said, do people just ever sit there and just live instead of trying to do this and trying to do that? Maybe about since the age of 20 to about now, 26 years later, about maybe 5 or 10 minutes of my life I've tried just to live. Like, most of my time I just think of like something to present, to bring to the stage. I travel places. I don't always enjoy, I'm going to go to a place and just be. I go to places that are like hot and dangerous.
You're gathering information.
Just to check it out and come back and go, what was I thinking? And so, and most of the time I find that the people are wonderful, and the trip, I try and go on trips that burn lean tissue. And basically, I use a menu given to me by Condoleezza Rice and George W. Bush, the Axis of Evil and the Outposts of Tyranny. And I was in Iran earlier this year for no other reason than I wanted to go, and I figured if people like John Bolton and the president keep rattling their corny sabers at that country, something will happen, or the CIA will push someone into a corner and something will go kaboom, and we'll have to go against, take our very tired and beleaguered army against a very well-rested, state-of-the-art armed army who will not passively suffer white Christian invaders, and something awful will happen in Tehran. In any case,
That's how you really feel.
Well, you know, that's my job. In any case, it won't be easy, and it'll be completely awful. So I went to Tehran out of Dubai. I flew there on New Year's Day to spend a week there just to meet people and see what I could see and find out what I could find out. And the most telling part of my journey started early when I went to the man in the glass box with my passport, and he just saw me, and then he looked down and saw the American passport, then looked back up at me with his face that said, "Man, you've got guts." And I was like, oh boy. And I was like, you know, my stomach went, and inside I was like, cool, I'm in the right place. And that's what I do to keep things interesting. So actually,
have you seen Michael Franti's movie? Does anyone know Michael Franti?
yeah, he's great.
The film that he made about going over there?
No, Michael Franti spent about 3 months or so living in Iraq, yeah? And he just did this documentary that a British journalist advised that I watch immediately. He had it on his desk. I have to get myself a copy. He was in the Beatniks for a moment, and then what was the other band with the great song he had?
It was Spearhead.
Oh, it was a Spearhead?
Yeah.
What was the television? The Disposable Heroes of Hip-Hoperacy. And he's got guts. And yeah, he went to Iraq and just kind of freestyled it for weeks, which is, I've been to Iraq in the green zone, in and out of the green zone via helicopter. And I was in a mortar attack one day, like the daily mortar attack. Like no one even around me even bothered to move except one poor guy who was either sane or was new. And he dove through the air and landed on the ground like this. And I was signing a man's photograph of me. It was a USO trip, and this guy hit the ground, and everyone kind of stood and looked at him and went, "What are you doing down there?" And he was trying to save face in front of other men. And he said, I slipped. And my very bad Kellogg Brown and Root coffee shot in a double brown spigot out of my nose as I said, "You slipped." And they all surrounded me and said, "Don't worry, sir, you're in a fortified building, sir, nothing will happen to you." I said, "That's cool." And then I kept signing the photograph and, you know, stood for the photo op, you know. And they said, "You're pretty brave." I went, "Oh, no, I'm not." And they said, "Well, how come you're not freaking out?" And I said, "Because I'm psychotic and I don't care when I die." And they all kind of stopped and went, "Well, sign this anyway." And I think they liked me, but it's by going to these, I try and actually do come back with that big marlin. I try and get the fish that can't get away and actually bring it on stage and go like, here. So when I blog, by golly, I said it. I even said the word for you. Well, I get a lot of letters at my website. You know, "Henry, you never talk to us enough. Do a journal thing." So I said, okay, for you, I'll do it. And there are these very Hemingway-esque things I call dispatches, named after the great Michael Hare book. And it's very laconic. Woke up, worked for many hours. And like the work is non-descriptive, because that's my work. Work for me is like dairy-free ice cream. Like, there's work. I work. I make it happen. Went back to the house, resumed working at 17:30 hours. Worked out. I sweated. It was good. Ate my utilitarian meal standing over the sink. Worked, masturbated, went to sleep. And people say, "Yay, I download all your dispatches. It's really cool. You sure work and jack off a lot."
It's really, it sounds basically exactly like my life, except I write about it really differently.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. You know, everyone has a way of doing things.
I had a question, though.
Yes, ma'am.
You said up until this point there had been 5 or 10 minutes where you actually did relax.
Yeah. I don't remember them. Oh, yes, I do.
I was going to ask you what they were like.
It was an enforced bit of relaxation.
And I don't mean relax, by the way. Relaxing is different. I mean, it doesn't have to be working and relaxing, but like maybe just stopping and like not necessarily like kicking back, but not necessarily pushing forward.
You
like
know, I
that
did
nice
it.
place in between.
I did it in 1997.
How did that go for you?
It was interesting, and it was unavoidable. I was in Madagascar, and I flew from Antananarivo, the capital city, out to the coast of the Indian Ocean, and I was living alone in a hut with a bunch of geckos. A book called The Ruined Map by Kobo Abe, an existentialist mystery book. That's how he described it. This is before he killed himself. And a Toblerone bar, and that's kind of all I had. And by day, I'd look at the geckos as they waited for night, and I read Kobo Abe, which is very hard to do for me, and I just kind of watched the candy bar melt, and I had like 4 more days, because the airplane doesn't come, and I just had to go, okay, take the car out of gear, and just be cool. And I actually then realized why people take vacations. It's a truly recharging and great experience. Then I had to start dealing with myself, and it became completely awful. And so thankfully the plane came, and I went somewhere else.
I don't know if that necessarily counts though. When it's forced on you from outside, it's much easier to do it when you're just stuck in a cabin.
Yeah.
But to do it at home.
Oh, willfully, like at home. Oh, I can't do it at home.
Right, like, can you be at home like with your email over there and like a studio over there and a bunch of dishes in the sink and like, you know, you could go do all of these many things, but actually like you don't do any of those things. You actually just sit and think, or you choose to do something other than getting something done. Do
you see how I'm sitting right now? Do you see that I'm actually burning calories as I sit here?
Do you ever, this is a totally honest question.
That's how anarchic and upsetting that idea is to me.
Do you ever get body work? Do you ever get...
Oh, someone touching me?
Someone touching you?
They've offered. Henry, you look pretty uptight. We paid, and we're gonna get you a massage. I'll break your arm if you come near me. No, I don't like hugging. I don't like the... Here, we'll adjust you, and don't adjust me.
You don't like hugging?
Don't adjust this dial.
You really don't like hugging?
I don't like it very much. Every once in a while, I'll see some people from my old neighborhood. So like, you know, like, hey, the man hugger, what's up? And I like picking up my friend.
Like the man hug where you hit each other at the same time?
Oh, that thing where you do like that thing like that. Dogs are on their hind legs and everyone's clapping. And I stick my hand out like, and she bypasses my hand, and she's like, 6'11", and she puts her arms around me and does that thing, like, okay, with the kissy pushy. And when I kiss a woman, they stay kissed. I mean, like, it's either on or it's just not on. You know what I mean? And so I'm not saying no, because her face shot past mine, and she was looking behind the chairs, and I was looking at the audience, and I didn't know what to do. And so I just figured our cheeks are touching, and I just kind of looked at the audience and went, and some people in the crowd caught it. A few people who knew who I was, they're like, oh yeah, he's so funny, look at him. He's like a gourami without a mate. And she must have thought I was from Mars, because she said, my God, the guy, I was like, a stick figure, like, release me. And I just did this movie recently where we got beat up a lot of physical scenes, and we were all bent out of shape and, water on the knee from hitting the ground a lot. And so the director said, we have hired a masseuse for you, a real good one, and this person's gonna work on you. I went, nah, can't do that. I'm sorry, but thanks. Oh no, it'll be really great. I'm like, it won't happen. I will not unlock my door of my hotel. Oh, they'll come in and set up, they'll be gone. I'm like, I can't. So I'm uptight like that. Maybe when I was like 8 or 9 years old, I was maybe a little bit more loose, but with age has come this weirdness about that with me.
What's that about?
I don't know what that's about. I'm just a weird dude who lives alone in a house. And I have dreams of work, and I get up every morning going, and I just kind of just go out there and do it. And I don't seem to enjoy a lot, but I like to go out there and do it. I don't know. I like, there's moments I do like.
I really want to give you a hug.
No.
But I'm not gonna.
I like
don't
those
worry.
90 seconds before sleep, where you're kind of like, I can't do
That's
anything.
usually when you're jacking off. If you're
No, that's usually right when school lets out. Hey, no, come on. You didn't hear that.
Sorry, we've degraded quickly. Sorry.
Okay, it's those few moments before sleep when you come up with that neat movie in your mind, like, oh, yeah, so right before the dreams start.
So, do you ever have girlfriends or lovers or anything like that? Like people that you're physically intimate with?
Yeah, no. It's been a while. There's it's easy to make some wrong turns there, to make some big mistakes, and go out with a girl who later parks in your driveway or camps out in your driveway or presses herself up against your window. And I've had some bad luck, so right now I'm just kind of sitting on the sidelines for the last couple of years. I'm just taking my time. Maybe when I'm 50. Was that too much information, Amanda? Was that?
No, definitely.
See, this is what I figured the job of the artist is to do, is to make the audience go like, I didn't need to hear that. Thank you. Just go blog somewhere.
Well, I mean, here's the question I would be genuinely curious about is if you have this fear of intimacy, is it something that you actually...
Good question. I don't have a fear of it. I just find it completely unnecessary. I'm glad you raised that question. I have zero interest at all. Like, I want to tell you my deepest, darkest secrets. Just don't. How about just not?
We're so different.
Huh?
I said we're so different, Henry.
Well, that, and more power to you for having the courage to be that vulnerable.
I never said I was. I haven't said anything either way.
Well, I thought since you said we were different, that we were perhaps opposite, where you are very vulnerable and you will tell someone something that can be used against you on the Howard Stern show later.
No, I think that the vulnerable thing is, I think that that's bullshit. I think that actually the more you share about yourself, the less vulnerable you become. I truly believe that.
Well, perhaps you divest yourself of something by saying some things.
Well, I think you disarm people. I think you actually make yourself more powerful.
I mean, there's some things that I don't mind talking about, but that kind of one-on-one thing with, like, when I'd go out with a girl, there's women in the world who know a whole lot about me because I've said, like, hey, this is what happened and this is the thing, and I don't know really what they'll do with that information. I've read about myself in books. I've seen women on TV talk about me and what I said. A couple of times on Howard Stern, part of the bad choices. And actually women I've never congressed with have talked about an evening with me. And I was like, I'd never even met that one. That has made me somewhat paranoid.
That's really threatening because then you're not just revealing yourself to a person, you're potentially revealing yourself. That is actually making yourself vulnerable because that's sharing yourself with more than just that one person if they're going to then go off and divulge that information.
Yeah, and I have no great deep dark secrets. Like there's nothing like, here's the 4 bodies in my backyard. I'm in fact so normal in most ways that it borders on complete catatonic boredom.
I don't think you're normal.
Oh, well, no, maybe not normal, but just like I'm not your problem in the neighborhood. You know what I mean? Like your kids will be safe, your animals will be safe. You will be safe. I would love to give you half my sandwich, help you out of the ditch. I'm kind of like this semi-psychotic samurai Boy Scout who operates with an alarming amount of innocence and naivete, with also kind of like this weird self-destructive homicidal thing, which I've never been able to figure out besides thinking it's kind of somehow sexy. But yeah.
So he's like, I know that's working.
I gave it a shot. But having had it turned against me a few times,
That must truly suck.
it totally destabilized me. That's what it did. It made me kind of go, okay, we'll just leave that alone. And over the years, I kind of just, I have this saying, I said, don't know, don't want to be known. And so I don't know if I'll ever get past that. I think when one does extend oneself out, it takes a great deal of trust in that other person. And I don't always feel okay about assigning that person that much trust. There's some people I trust completely. People I grew up with.
You obviously have other people in your life who you're intimate with, but not physically intimate with. They're
Yeah, I think
friends who know everything that happens to you, who you trust, who you can confide.
Yeah, my people from my old neighborhood who I grew up with, I've known for 35 years. It's like my friend Ian Mackay, a longtime friend of mine, kind of a well-known rock dude. I've known Ian since we were like 12 or 8 or something, and he's my older, younger brother. And Ian probably knows lots more about me than I do at this point, because I'm too busy in the middle of it, and he kind of can look at me and go like, whew. So yeah, I can tell him anything, but I don't. There's a lot of things I just keep to myself, as many of us do. Perhaps we should let these people go and they've asked us if any of you are so inclined, if you would want to ask questions of either of us. And so if you want, and she had a great idea. She said we should ask people to ask the same question of both of us, so both of us are put kind of on the line there. And you're free to do that. If I really like the questions where someone doesn't like me, or they severely disagree with something, especially political stuff. Like, I think Karl Rove is a fucking douchebag and he should go to jail right now. And I think George W. Bush should just only eat the intestines of young men that he killed in Iraq. So if any of you think I should move out of America for having that sentiment and you want to ask me something, let's put you at the front of the line. Because my vitamin C is confrontation.
So we do have a couple
Pass
mics
Yeah, let's
in the back
actually-
here.
Let's try to stick to the rule that, well, I mean, we'll both keep our answers relatively brief, but you have to ask us one question, and it has to be a question that both of us would supposedly be in the position to answer. So,
Or maybe
if
it
you're
would
asking,
make one of us uncomfortable to answer, and maybe that's where it gets
right?
fun.
I mean, I'd love to see you answer. What's the song "Coin-Operated Boy" about? It might be really not. Well, let's just let that go and let's start the questions. So there's a mic back there and a mic
There's
back there.
two mics, and we'll just alternate
And,
between left side and right side. If you can just come back to the
Okay.
stationary mics by the trees back here.
It's these situations you fear if no one has a question. Thank goodness you arrived, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. My question was initially for Mr. Rollins, but actually it can be answered by both of you. But first, just towards him first. I just recently kind of discovered your now wide body of work, from like the books that you've written, your spoken word, the music you've done. And I've read some of your earlier works where you are very open and describe a lot of very personal things that happen to you from just a very intimate. And the question that's to both of you is that you, for just your large body of work, and you just for the future, do you think that you will or you have ever regretted giving up so much of your privacy through the work which you like to do, from the writing, from the music, just that when both of you pour so much of yourselves into the work and it's out there and it's just so obvious, and people say, oh, I know him, or I know her because I really understand what it is they were writing about, or gosh, all those things they laid bare about their soul and things like that, but that's so much privacy is just gone. Do you ever feel a sense of like remorse or just like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have written it or should have put that out there?
Okay.
To me, that's the best part of the job, actually. It's taken me, it took me a large part of my 20s to actually be able to admit that I was a performer first, basically, and a musician second, and that I wrote the music so that I could perform. And then when I hit my 30s, I realized it was even, and I thought that that was really shameful, and I had to sort of get over the fact that I thought that that was sort of shameful, because I didn't want to be some incredible musician, and actually I wanted to just share with people. And that the more recent realization is that the reason I wanted to perform is because I wanted to fundamentally connect with people and share myself, and and actually make that very human contact and challenge myself to be as honest as possible, not just on stage, but literally standing there talking with the people that I'm performing for. And so it's sort of backwards. I feel like I haven't given up my privacy. I feel like it's more of a privilege that I would say something and that anyone would be remotely fucking interested. Do you know what I'm saying?
You want me to answer now?
Please.
Okay. I have never regretted anything that I've written as far as giving away any privacy. The only thing I regret of any of that is some of the awful self-indulgences I've taken in writing and the trees that died. And the people who actually wasted their time reading the stuff. But no, I always thought that was the job, was to kind of take what's inside and turn it out there. And so no, some of it was painful, but if it was true, then I felt this compelling need, and I still do, to say it or to express it. So I've never had any regrets. That's the kind of thing where that kind of intimacy or privacy, I just, there it is. It's just other stuff. It's probably just my immaturity and lack of social skills that precludes me from expressing myself in other ways, like, on the date or whatever. But, some guys will not ever admit to crying. I cry fairly often, especially with what I've been seeing with this awful war. So I always, like I said, I thought that was the job, to turn it loose, and hopefully by doing that, other people get something from that, and maybe it gets them through. It's not necessarily the job, but it's definitely part of it. Otherwise, to me, with art and expression, without taking any kind of risk, I think that's why we like paintings, or we like great acting or whatever, because that person is risking something. That's why I've always been alienated by the really pretty people who sing, where they're pretty first and then they kind of get the singing together later. I'd rather, Patsy Cline's working for me more than, the pretty MTV girls who happen to sing as an accessory to all the other things they do photo ops for. I hope that, sir, I do hope that we answered your question.
It did. No, thank you very much, both of you. Thank you.
You guys talked about dealing with the press and your various troubles with them, but it seems to me that most everybody I know who's done any press for music or rock has been...
A little bit
It
louder.
seems like most people who have done any press for music or rock that I've known have been fans and gone into it from that. Does that ever reach into the equation or affect anything?
I don't totally understand what you're saying, that most music critics are fans of music?
Well, I mean, most people who got into any type of journalism and a specific type of critiquing or anything like that got into it because of fanship. And when dealing with people who are angry at you, it seems.
Or frustrated musicianship.
I don't necessarily agree with your question, which might make for a fairly interesting answer. I think that some music critics, and I'm not above a bad review, nor do I really care, in that it's a democracy. If you want to write something deplorable about something I've done, you're probably right, and it is your right. But I think a lot of music critics, I call them ants at the picnic, they could not do, so they write about those who do. And I think there are some really great music writers in America, and there have been some people who are now no longer with us, but there's some great jazz writers back in the 50s and 60s, Ralph J. Gleason, people like that, who could really write about someone's show and put you through something. I do think now a lot of it's gratuitous, where there's like online critics, and they just, they blog. But I find a lot of those reviews often lacking with any calories, like the guy or gal didn't really engage in the art and they're not really a critic, they're just someone with an attitude and a keyboard, which any of us are. To make the writing really mean something, that turns you into a critic. So, and I don't necessarily think those people need to be fans of it. Maybe that would somehow color their review. I do think there's like the frustrated novelist who now works at the New Musical Express in England, and I don't know. I have no idea what that's about. I'm going to stop talking because the gods are not prevailing upon me.
Well, they got it. I mean, I pretty much agree with everything he just said and more. I would say it's in the music industry. It's really it can become depressing because as you find there are a lot of people who work behind the desks who actually would actively rather be making music or did make music at one point, couldn't make enough money making it, and so got jobs at labels. For instance, it's always very depressing to meet record label people who sort of look at you and they're like, I was in a band. And you're just like, oh no, because you just get the feeling that they actually hate working for you because you're doing what they wanted to do. And so they're, you can feel like you're sort of always under attack because there's always going to be some degree of resentment that you have your job and they have theirs. But when they're great music critics, they're great writers, and they're not just great writers, they are great fans. And hopefully they're such great fans that if they see some horrible show or hear some terrible record, they're going to be just as passionate about it, as they would be about some great piece of music, and they will write about it well.
And by doing that, we'll give the artist respect. If you are looking for some great music writing, a guy named Peter Guralnick, I think, is very, very fine. His book, Feel Like Going Home, where he interviews all these blues guys who are now long dead. It's one of the greatest music books I've ever read. And he's a guy who could write, or still does write, a great deal about music, and he writes about it very, very well. He's not to be missed, I think.
There's some really great quote, and someone might know it better than me. I was trying to think of what it was, but it was something like, writing about music is like talking about fucking, or something like that. Writing about music is like dancing about architecture. If you can do it well, you've actually probably out-arted a lot of the musicians that you're writing about.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello. Wow, that was loud. So this is, I guess one part is a statement, the other part is kind of a fun question. Well, I think it would be fun anyway. So the statement is that I kind of appreciate the fact that, and correct me if I'm wrong, both of you seem like that you never had a plan B, just in case plan A didn't work out. You just went with plan A, and I applaud that, so that's very cool.
Plan B is we were just going to hug for 45 minutes.
Well, I don't mean specifically in this venue, I mean with your careers.
Oh.
I appreciate that. If you want a hug, that's cool too. Now, the more fun question is, and I have my top two musicians or artists in general that you would want to see dragged behind a car. My top two would have to be Michael Stipe.
Say that again, I didn't hear you.
The top two musicians or artists that you would want to see dragged behind a car. My top two would have to be Bono and Michael Stipe, but...
I've driven in a car with Michael Stipe. I'm
That's
still
close.
here.
Close.
He was a very careful driver. It was me and him and his dog. I've never driven with Bono. So are we to pick out 2 artists who we would never drive with?
Well,
I think he means strongly dislike.
yes,
Oh.
yes,
Oh, so we're supposed to talk about artists we dislike?
sure. Just 2 names.
I just don't listen to them. I don't.
Yeah, I
Years
mean,
ago, I may have been able to. Oh, I hate this guy. Now I just don't listen. Or
I want to
watch.
definitely go on record saying there's no one in the world I hate enough to want to actually drag behind a car.
Oh, is that what you said?
Metaphysical.
Oh, I thought you said drive in a car.
yeah, but,
Oh,
I
you
mean,
said
just-
drag behind a car?
Yes, behind.
Oh.
You can be driving. Michael Stipe could be driving
Oh,
someone behind a car.
I didn't fully divine the lethal intent there.
You know what? I think I can genuinely say there aren't any artists that I hate. There are artists that I feel badly for. But
That's very charitable.
I really don't hate any artists. Most artists that I see where I just like am hanging my head and thinking, God, this music is such crap. I feel badly for them because I just imagine that they're not enjoying themselves. If that is any kind of an answer.
Maybe to expand on your theme, I can't think of a single person in the world, living or dead, who I would like to drag behind a car. There's some people I'd like to see go do 150 years in jail, and I'll gladly pay for those cheese sandwiches. But I see what you're saying. Sometimes you see people and you're like, man, that guy's just got to stop.
Exactly.
I feel you, but you know, because I bet you we couldn't get you to drag someone down a bumpy road by one ankle and a chain. You'd go, nah, I don't like him, but I don't want to drag him till his head comes off.
So we're running.
But we sure
One,
would have
two.
fun running up his phone bill and clogging his toilet and blowing up his stereo, stuff like that.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Do we have time for
Yeah, we have time for 2 more questions.
2 more? Awesome.
All right, it's going to be hard for me to ask this of both of you, but I'll try and frame it in a way that you can
One of
both
us will just fake it.
participate. I'm Iranian, so I'm really curious to hear more about your trip to Iran. And I'll just say that I went there a couple of years ago, and I really dislike what's going on in the States, but I really, really had a problem with the way that country was run. And if you want to just comment on your views about Iran,
Okay,
I guess.
with the way the acoustics are.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm just you had a disagreement with the way Iran.
Yeah, I'm Iranian.
run?
I'm Iranian, yeah. And I was there as a woman, as a guest of their film festival, and I was appalled at many things daily. And I
Wait,
had to, yeah.
You get called things here.
Well, no, it was more just feeling like there was a people who did not have, who were constantly fucked with on a daily basis over little things, and a country whose infrastructure was falling apart because there was a bunch of people basically tyrannizing them. Having said that, I have a lot of problems with what's going on here. But I'm just curious as to what you did, who you saw, and what your impressions were there.
My impressions of Iran.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. I had a really good time, and I met a lot of really wonderful people and ate a lot of really good food. And I like I said before, I went there because I was curious, and I went to school with Iranian guys. They were boarding students at the all-boys school I went to, and they taught me how to curse in Farsi. And one guy, Milad Kurami, actually the reason I got out of high school is because Milad would help me in math. And there's a great woman named Shireen Nishat, and she's one of my heroes, and she's a pal of mine. And I met her a few summers ago, and I said, I've always been curious about your country. And she said, promise me you'll go to Tehran. I said, okay. And she said, if you do, I'm going to hook you up with my friends and family. And I went, and she did. So I met her family. I met her sister, Modocht, and her friends. In any case, the people I met expressed their frustration with Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, and the fact that the women I met were very, very smart and very frustrated that they could not go further with all that stuff they had.
No, Shireen can't go back there.
I'm sorry?
You know, Shireen cannot go back there.
No, she can't, and believe me, it pains her to no end. As close as she gets to her family, I think they meet in Austria. And I actually sent her, I couldn't get email out of Iran sending files, but I took photos of me and her mother and her sister and sent them from Israel, actually, and she was very happy to see that I had actually met them, and she's fantastic. But I met wonderful people. And I walked all over Tehran by myself, and never feeling threatened. It took me a few hours a day to shake off my government assigned tour guide, a guy named Reza. But actually, after I shook him off, I just walked all over the north part of the city, which is very beautiful. And anyone who ever heard me speak English would come up and go like, "Where are you from?" I'd say, "America." They'd say, "I like America." And I'd say, "I like Iran." I'm shaking hands, trying to be like the good vibe ambassador. So just basically communicating with people. But and I have a lot of problems with the way things are run there. You know, just the fact that women are restricted, and so Iran misses out on all that wonderful potential that women can give to their country and make their country a better place. And that's basically, and as a woman, I'm sure you've run into it many times in your life, men and their fragile eggshell-thin egos will screw up every good thing a woman tries to do on this planet because they're touchy about women being faster, smarter, and better aim. And so I think Iran right now suffers from a bit of that. But I think if they had a real fair election, you might see a different day there. And I think in our lifetime, things will be much different there and much better.
I hope so. Thank you.
Me too.
Talking about other countries for Henry first, I think your most insightful stories are the ones from about 10 years ago from Think Tank, where you're talking about drinking dodgy water in Russia and talking to Czechs.
Can you get a little closer to the mic?
Oh, you're talking about travel, you're talking about being in Moscow and reading Dostoevsky at Red Square and actually getting out to meet people from different countries and getting to know their experiences and things like that. Would you have, I just want to ask what your political evolution is from maybe 10 years ago, and what type of advice you'd have for someone that would work for an NGO or work for a multinational organization, and just what you think of how things have come from you've had these experiences. Like I remember one of my favorite stories of yours is breaking down in the Autobahn when you had no money, and like people that want to see the world and eventually try to affect it in any way, vis-a-vis through an NGO or a multi-governmental.
I was stoned when I wrote that.
So are you saying to pick an NGO to be part of, or?
No, I mean just from your world experience, how has the world changed? What's your evolution of the world from you having these stories? My favorite stories is the Russian one, when you had that moment. So you're talking about
when I was reading Dostoevsky in Russia. Yeah, that was '97.
So that's about 10 years ago. What's from then to now? How do you see the world different?
Well, I travel quite a bit all over pretty much every continent, and what I've seen in the last 10 years has been, well, it was really wonderful touring during the Clinton administration because people seem to be a bit friendlier, and they've tightened up a little bit in the last 6 years. And I think where I've been and what I've seen in the last 10 years, the world is becoming ever more smaller, where you can always find a Starbucks in places where I don't necessarily think one should always be able to find a Starbucks. No Starbucks in Iran. That was refreshing. But when you start seeing like the KFC in Bangkok, in places like that, you realize America has imprinted itself on the world, and it's our way or the highway. And that is the single one thing I've noticed when I can go into the deepest parts of Egypt or into Kenya or into Johannesburg or Calcutta or wherever else I've been and still keep finding Pepsi and Nike and someone who will say, do you want a 5-piece box or a 3-piece box? I'm like, wow, that really shouldn't be coming out of your mouth. I'm so sorry that you say that. And I'm so sorry to see people in Honduras lining up to eat at Wendy's. It's just hard to take. That's what I've noticed, and that's that, Thomas Friedman's wet dream of the flat and globalized world. I kind of like getting out of airplanes into countries where you go like, wow, I don't know how to speak this language, and I'm gonna have to be real frickin' polite to get through this day. A lot of pointing, gesturing, and being real cool. But now you can go anywhere and go, hey pal, how can I get here? And the guy gives you the world-weary shrug, because of course he understands English. So I think the world is getting smaller and more scared of what is to be. And I think this is the country that sees itself as the ushers of what is to be. And there's going to be some big bumps in that road coming up. And what can you do? I say travel as much as possible, meet as many people as you can from foreign lands, go as far and as wide as you can, be friendly, and say, hey, please come visit us in New York and San Francisco and Chicago. We're nice people. We're not all in the Klan, and some of us can read.